2026 sees me travel the length and breadth of England to run a marathon per week in each of its 39 historic counties. Why? To raise funds for Tommy's, the charity that does incredible work to try to end the heartbreak of baby loss. I'll be joined each week by someone who has their own story of loss, their own rollercoaster journey, their own reason to be there. This podcast shares those stories in the hope that they can bring awareness to an often undiscussed topic and even, perhaps, a flicker of light in someone's darkness. You can follow the runs, the stories, and donate to the cause at marathonsformiracles.com. Enjoy. Hello. Welcome to week 15 of Marathons for Miracles. I think I say this every week, but a particularly special week this week. And I think I can say that genuinely this week because we're home. This is my home leg. Obviously, Amy and I now live in Shrewsbury, which is in Shropshire, and running with one of our besties, Faye, who also lives in Shropshire. So really looking forward to this one. We are going to be running close to home. We've got lots of friends and family around. I don't have to get up at stupid o'clock in the morning. I don't have to drive for 3 hours anywhere. It's going to be fantastic. But aside from the logistical points, really nice to be running with some very good friends and in very familiar country. So Faye, welcome at last. It seems like it's taken forever to get to this point, but welcome at last to the challenge and to the podcast.
Thank you. I'm very excited and nervous.
So you're nervous. Are you nervous about the run or are you nervous about the podcast?
A little bit of both. The run, I did our calculation and I've realised I'm 4 miles short, so need to recheck.
But not nervous about the podcast, that means. So we'll have a good one. But Faye's is a story that has a lot of familiar points to a lot of stuff that we've been talking about and a lot of the topics we've been discussing, but also some very new angles and some fairly wild scenarios that I'll let Faye talk you through. But also a really interesting and relevant time to be having the conversation, given that Faye and Freddie are now trying to have a family themselves again. So a really interesting conversation. And as ever, hugely grateful to Faye for coming on and sharing her thoughts with us. So I will kick things off in the usual fashion and ask you, Faye, what led you to be involved with Marathons for Miracles and the Tommy's cause?
Okay, so as you know this, Olly, I have never really shared this story or this scenario that I went through now nearly 10 years ago. It will be 9 years this summer. I really genuinely can count on one hand the amount of people that know this. And I think even if I were to ask my sisters and my mum, they probably don't really know the intricacies of what went on. It's been that quiet in my kind of heart. But when I found out that you and Amy were putting together this challenge, it felt wrong to sit back and watch my best friends all talk about things they've gone through. It seemed wrong for you to be trying to gather so many people across the country to talk about these things. And for me to sit back and have so much to say about this topic and to want to be part of the conversation, but have never tried to be, or in many respects wanted to be at the time. And so I felt like it was selfishly the moment I could come out and say, I do actually know how it feels, and I would like to be part of this conversation. And also it's become really relevant at this moment in time for Freddie and I, because we are now trying for a baby, and that experience has really frightened me, and it's a huge weight, I think, on my shoulders that happened, and it's obviously going to come up in my medical history and all these things. And so I had to tell him, I wanted to tell him, and then that sparked more conversations. So it's kind of all come together at the right time.
Well, that's good. I'm glad we could be of service. But no, I mean, you feel like it's allowed you to feel like you could come out and talk about these things.
Yeah.
We've said a number of times on the podcast, that's sort of exactly what we're trying to do, is you sort of put that olive branch out into the world and people reach out and take it. it makes people feel more comfortable to discuss these things. It gives them a safe. It makes people feel comfortable and feel like they can approach you and have these conversations. I literally, before we came on to record this podcast, I had an Instagram message from a friend who I was at uni with who said, I've been following your challenge from the outset because I thought it was really cool what you were doing. But now actually my wife had a miscarriage last week, and have you got any advice and can you point me in the right direction? And
Yeah.
obviously that's a bittersweet message to receive because it's not news that you want to hear. But if we hadn't started doing this, he wouldn't have known that we'd been there, that we'd done it, and wouldn't have necessarily have known where to go, or wouldn't have known that he could send me a message. So that's exactly
Yeah,
what we're trying to achieve. And if that's happened with you very close to home, then
it has.
Thank-
And I think with something like this, you can get lost with the statistics of who is listening to the podcast or who is watching the podcasts, who is donating, who is messaging. But there is going to be 95% of people that will be silently viewing this content who don't feel ready yet or comfortable to reach out. And it's for those people as well, I think, because there will be a far, far wider reach than I think any of us would realise. It will be all those silent viewers that at least feel that there are other people out there who are talking about it and they can listen and resonate in their own way, even if they're not ready to share. And I think that's something else that this podcast is giving, because the amount of I've listened to all the episodes, but the amount of times people have said something and I thought, I did exactly that, or I've done exactly that. And I think we're all doing the same thing, which again just gives you that support behind the scenes.
yeah, it's what we're trying to do. So I guess with that in mind, you mentioned that you've not really spoken about what happened 9 years ago to that many people, but perhaps you could tell us a little bit more about what did happen.
Yeah. I think my story perhaps adds a different angle to the conversation of baby loss and miscarriage, because most people who openly talk about miscarriage, and obviously that's very few and far between anyway, but I think most people, we think of them as people who are actively trying and who 100% want that pregnancy. And so when they sadly go on to lose that baby, the emotions they experience is perhaps what we'd expect, desperately sad, a real painful time. And my experience was very different. I was with someone who I hadn't known very long. And you know this, I'm not a reckless person. I'm quite the opposite, very much, very risk averse. I was on contraception, was about to go and train to be a barrister, so had no intentions of becoming pregnant, and was sick for a period of time. I didn't think anything of it, and then found myself pregnant at the age of 23, with this whole future ahead of me that I'd worked really, really hard for. And it just fell at terrible timing. A bit of a rough ride at university with my dad not being well and passing away, and my mum struggling. And so when I got the pregnancy test back and saw that it was positive, I'll be honest, my heart sank. I remember crying my eyes out in a toilet, and it just was not something I was expecting. And the first person I rang was my mum. And I remember saying to her, I was so apologetic. And I thought everyone would be really angry and disappointed in me. And I was met with such a different response to what I was expecting. She was really calm, really supportive. She kind of said, well, she didn't know my dad very well when she fell pregnant with me, albeit the other end of age. She was in her early 40s. And she was very much of the attitude, don't be daft. We can do this, between us. I've got two sisters. Us girls can totally handle a baby. And I kind of thought, okay. And I then told my then partner, and he was brilliant. He said, well, we'll do what you want to do. I suppose that kind of quite typical supportive male response. And we sort of sat back for a few weeks and thought about it whilst we were weighing up all the options. And I then went for a scan. I had an early scan. And at that point, heard heartbeat thought, oh my God, what are you doing? You definitely can do this. You're absolutely fine. And so we were due to go on holiday with people that I didn't know, lots of his friends I'd never met before. And it was on that holiday that I lost our baby, completely away from home, away from the NHS. And yeah, it was really difficult because my first overriding feeling, and I'm sure we'll talk about so many different feelings in a moment like this, but my first overriding feeling, I'll never ever forget it, was that I just didn't deserve that. I didn't deserve to have that baby because I'd questioned it. And yeah, I just felt so much shame, I think. And that was my moment of the initial loss.
That's tough in so many ways. Even though I've heard this story before, Faye and I went on a training run just before Christmas and sort of knew this podcast was coming. And Faye sort of said, I think I need to have a bit of a practice run. Can we do it today? And I said, yeah, sure. We've got 20 miles. Let's give it a crack. And even sort of having heard the story before, it's still really tough to hear. And I just can't imagine being in that position. Firstly, from sort of going from having a baby that you didn't necessarily want to then deciding that you did want it, to then having it taken away. And as you say, the emotions in these scenarios are all very heightened as it is. But there's just whole new layers in there. And then, of course, being away from home as well. Where were you?
I was in Canada. I should say, I mean, I know that at the point that him and I
So not
separated,
a little bit away from home, like
yeah, really
very
far.
away from home.
Really, really far. And at the point of him and I separating, we still hadn't even told his parents that this had happened. So when I say we were secretive about it, we were secretive. So if any of his friends listen to this, those friends that were with us in Canada, this will be the first time that they know that was happening, which is, it's been so long now that, I think it's okay to talk about, but it was a really, it was a horrendous thing to go through. And we hid it from everybody. And I just remember effectively losing this baby over a period of days, I think 4 or 5 days in various different hotel rooms as we traveled around Vancouver and Whistler. Just putting a smile on my face as though it was completely fine, and until it wasn't fine, until I really was in absolute agony, because having seen Amy go through it, and she was much further along than I was still in that 8-9 week period, because we'd gone on holiday pretty much straight away after the scan. It was so painful, and I think I had a pack of paracetamol, and that was it.
Did you get any medical attention in Canada whilst you were out there, or did you leave it till you came home?
No, I was so, do you know, looking back, I don't know why I did that, because I'm going to say this now, but someone's going to disagree. I think I'm quite sensible.
Yeah.
I'm really not a risky person. And yet I was prepared to put myself through a lot of pain and quite risky type situations in terms of infection, which I did then get, just because I was too ashamed to say. And when I got back, we traveled around Canada for a good while. And when I got back and when I rang the doctor and said that this has happened, nobody invited me to come back for an appointment. And I didn't question that either, whether that was because I was too young to think about it, whether it was because in my head, actually, I was so pleased to have run away from the whole thing in my mind. I didn't want to revisit it. I didn't want to think about it. I just put it in a box mentally, pretended it had never happened. And that is how we lived for the following 4 years that we were together. But nobody from the hospital or the practice surgery said, you need to come in.
Possibly, I guess, perhaps they looked at it and said, well, this happened 3 weeks ago and I'm home now.
Yeah.
Perhaps if you'd have said this is happening now, they might have, I don't know. I hate to second guess, but the idea of hiding and the idea of being ashamed, I think that taps into an issue and one of the big issues that we talk about a lot. And it's that sort of societal attitude towards both the pregnancy for you as someone who was quite young and not necessarily trying, and the look that has,
Yeah.
which is something we haven't really touched on. But then also just the idea of people talking about miscarriages and trying to, or not talking about miscarriages and trying to cover them up and keep things secret, and how unhealthy that actually is. But then that stems from, well, you tell me, what do you think? That it's a long time ago now, but what did that stem from?
I think some of it was shame for even getting pregnant in the
Mm,
first place. And I look back and I think, it's not like I was 15 or 16. I was a 23-year-old woman in a home. I hadn't lived with my parents for years, passed away at uni, but I hadn't lived with my parents for years. Um, I was about to embark on a really big career. I was quite a stable person,
mm,
and he too was really stable and settled. So I think that was in my mind. I actually don't think anybody would have thought negatively about us. So I think that was something that I was trying to grapple with because I was
mm,
ashamed of myself. But in terms of hiding it, I think one of the hardest things I experienced, and again, I've heard others touch on this, is, and this is why I'm so open about Freddie and I trying now, is because when nobody knows you're pregnant and then you lose a baby, it's really hard to then say to people, oh, by the way, I was pregnant a month ago and now I'm not, but I want to talk about it. Because most
mm,
people say, well, it's not really, well, they would have done perhaps back then when it wasn't as much of a big conversation. They wouldn't really know where to go with that, I think, particularly when, you're in your young, early 20s, everyone's still really partying and single. And I just don't want that to happen to me again. I'd rather people know early doors, and then there is a safe place to talk about things if it
yeah,
doesn't go well.
yeah, absolutely. And as you say, we've spoken about it a lot, and different scale, I guess. But Amy and I were very early to tell people when we were pregnant with Poppy following our miscarriage, because again, we didn't want to get to a position where that might happen again. And exactly as you said, you have to tell people that you were pregnant, but now you're not, and that's really hard. It just adds difficulty to a. It's like,
Yeah.
it seems like a small point, but then when we progress further in the pregnancy with Poppy, and you get to the point where you can find out if it's a boy or a girl, and people said, "Oh, why?" We said we wanted to find out, and people said, "Oh no, why would you?" I was like, "Let's remove all guesswork from this process. As
Yeah.
much guesswork as can be removed from the pregnancy process as possible. I want to do
Yeah.
that. I want to do that. I want to do the thing where I know what's happening as much as possible throughout the entire next 9 months." And so, like I say, it's a small point, but it links into the same sort of mindset, I guess. You mentioned infection. What were the lasting effects for you? Do you think that stemmed from not having seen someone in the first place, or do you think they were inevitable anyway? What were you told at the time?
So the day that I started to miscarry, I was effectively out in the public. I wasn't at home. I wasn't in a sterile environment in a hospital. I was just in public toilets effectively, as you are on holiday. And
Mm,
because I was trying to hide it, I'd still go to the beach. I was still obviously in a hotel room in the evening, or then at his friend's house, and just generally not understanding how long it would go on for. I didn't know a single person that had ever miscarried when I was 23. I've got two older sisters, as you know, quite a bit older. So they had children by the time I was in my teen years. They've never miscarried. My mum has never miscarried, which is wonderful. I would never ever want those women in my life to go through something like this. But it lured me in for such a false sense of security that when it happened, I didn't have a clue. Not a clue. Yeah, I just didn't look after myself at all. And I let myself, um, I mean, Ollie, you know this, but I even camped. I don't know what I was thinking. I was so embarrassed that I didn't even say, I can't possibly go camping. And I dragged my body up a mountain to camp for I think it was Was it sunrise? I think it was sunrise, but I was so ill at that point. I remember saying to him, "You have to get me off this. I can't do this." And we just made up
Mm.
some excuse. But I ended up with 2 womb infections, which obviously that's antibiotics and various things when you get back. They kind of came to my knowledge over the sort of few months after it's happened, because I'm sorry if this is really graphic, but perhaps other people need to know this in case they don't know what they're experiencing. But I would just bleed really profusely, quite violently out of nowhere, and I didn't really know why.
Mm.
And so, yeah, I had to, at some point, a few months later, have a sweep, have a set of antibiotics, and then ended up also having injections to try and sort of help the lining of my uterus wall lining. So it was really invasive and actually made things worse.
Mm.
I should have just gone to the doctors from the get-go.
And how long that lasts?
I actually had to have the injections again the following year as like a top-up. But I think the actual course of antibiotics was a couple of weeks, but I'd let myself suffer for a good few months before that.
Yeah.
So,
It's
yeah.
it's not something necessarily that I need or want to pry on, but I think it's important because where there is a perception of miscarriage, and as you said, for you personally, when it was happening, you had no perception of what was coming. And I think that is often the case for people going through it. But where there is a perception, it's of quite a minor, mild, slightly heavy bleeding, few days, all done and dusted, move on, try again. If you want to, obviously in your case, it's slightly different circumstances, but
Yeah.
I think that's what is perceived to be what a miscarriage looks like. And it's just not. And there isn't, I guess it can be, but the experiences that we've seen are so varied, and some of them actually very serious medical cases, and can have really unpleasant lasting effects. And so I think it is, whilst, as you said, you don't necessarily want the gory details, but it is important because that's the reality of
Yeah.
a lot of these situations. So
Yeah. Yeah. It's one of
yeah,
my
go on.
biggest regrets.
Thinking about where you and Freddie are now
Mhm.
compared to where you were then, and thinking about the circumstances leading into your pregnancy and your sort of new relationship and your uncertainty around the pregnancy in the first place,
Yeah.
was there ever a sense of relief after the miscarriage?
Yeah.
And I know that's not a particularly nice question to ask, so I'm going to sort of caveat
No,
that. But
it's an important question, isn't it? Because again, this is partly why I think it's really important I share this, because there are women out there, there are plenty of women out there must be, who find themselves in this situation. And I can't tell you the amount of emotions that I felt during that time, because you have so much sadness and there's so much sort of grief. But in a situation whereby you didn't know, or it wasn't right timing and turned out wouldn't have been the right person. But there is an element of relief. Well, there certainly was then. And the added guilt that put on me felt really overwhelming, because I think that's also partly why I didn't seek out help. I didn't feel like I deserved it. I didn't feel like anybody should have any sympathy for me. And I felt almost worse saying, well, I wasn't sure. Then I really was sure, and I was actually really excited. But now sort of the decision has been taken away from me. Is that fate intervening? And I shouldn't have gone ahead with it. It was really complicated. And as a 23-year-old girl, I just didn't have a clue what I was doing with those emotions. Not a clue. And I never spoke about it with anybody. I've never had this conversation with my mum, with my sisters, with a best friend. I've never openly said to anyone, I think, that I was so full of shame for initially not being excited. I think it's almost worse now because Freddie and I are trying, and that that pregnancy almost lured me into a bit of a false sense of security about how easy it is to get pregnant, because I was not risky at all, and had one blip of being sick. I think I had gastroenteritis, and it just happened. And so I have spent 9 years thinking, when I want this to happen again, or if I'm lucky enough for this to happen again, then it will. And wow, was I wrong about that? So I've also got guilt that I had the audacity to think I had a choice. In many respects, you have that choice because in ways, and it's not at all to say that, if people make that choice themselves to end a pregnancy, of course, that's a very different situation. But miscarriage and getting pregnant is really quite tricky to navigate.
I am increasingly humbled by a lot of these conversations that we have, because I don't know why people are prepared to share these things with me and with the podcast necessarily, but I think hopefully it stems from what we were talking about at the start of trying to sort of, by putting your story out there, it creates that safe space. But yeah, it's really humbling for you to share things like that, as you say, that you've not necessarily spoken to your mum about. So thank you. And I can see that, like, it is a complete mindfuck of emotions,
Yes.
because it's highs and lows. And for the record, there is no one I know who loves babies more than Faye.
I really love them.
And
Yeah,
is sort
really
of
love
on that journey to becoming a mum, hopefully, and would be the last person to wish for a miscarriage. And so for that same person to be in a situation where perhaps a miscarriage may have, in some weird, strange way, been a relief, it just tells you how difficult these scenarios are.
Yeah. And again, I don't know
How they
whether.
need navigating, and how it's almost impossible to navigate them. And I'll say this to you, Faye, off the back of your comments about sort of feeling guilt and shame, and also it's impossible to navigate these situations perfectly. Like there's just no way to do it. At some point, you're going to have a really malicious thought in your head in some way, shape, or form that's related to your miscarriage. And I think anyone and everyone who's been through it would say the same thing. You can hate yourself for that, or you can just accept that. How are you possibly supposed to get from A to B without a few peaks and troughs along the way? Like, it's just not doable.
And I think the human brain is really resilient, isn't it? And I think sometimes you can frame situations in your life as having a positive spin, because that's easier to separate. I was listening to Edwina's podcast actually this morning on a long run, and she does exactly the same thing. She phrases the positives of her losses and gives it, well, I suppose an edge whereby she managed her own expectations. And I think maybe, is that what I was still doing now, by saying that I had a little element of relief? Is that just because it's easier to tolerate than actually having been excited? I don't know. I don't really know where the truth of those emotions are, but I do know probably that some of it just ultimately that protective element of brain trying to reframe things in a way that is easier.
Do you feel, now that you are with Freddie and happily married and looking to hopefully have kids yourselves, does what happened before, does it play on your mind going into a potential pregnancy? What emotions do you think you carry over from that time into this?
Yeah, in terms of playing on my mind, I would say I think about it, if not every day, probably every other day. I think about it a lot. I mean, I've probably thought about it a lot anyway over the years, but certainly it's played a huge part of my thinking in the last sort of year. But Freddie, you know this, Olly, but Freddie is one of the most incredible people I have ever known, which is why I married him. And his take on becoming a family is like nothing I have ever known. He's always so calm about this topic, and he always has been, because although I never really told him the whole story about what had happened, he knew snippets. And so for quite a few years now, his phrase to me has always been, whatever way it has to happen, we will make sure you're a mum. We will make sure that we have children in our family, whether that is through, naturally becoming pregnant, whether that's through, other means, whether that's through adopting. He's always been really matter of fact about it. And that's been really, really reassuring. And that's actually without any problems happening. That's just truly what he feels. Because we're nowhere near having to think about any of those options at the moment. We're still really early in our journey.
Yeah.
But the fact that he already, in his heart, just accepts all of these other avenues he's just incredible. And he just thinks of us, I think, as being a family unit. And whatever that looks like doesn't change the love that our family unit would have.
Yeah.
Yeah, he's just incredible like that. So the pressure really is lifted from him coming at it in that way.
There's certainly no pressure coming from Freddie by the sounds of it. And having spoken to you both about it, I know that to be true. But I guess there'll be some pressure you're putting on yourself, Faye, I'm sure. Again, knowing you and
yeah.
it's that's never helped by losses that have happened in the past. Yeah, I hope that you can enjoy the process and see the process for what it is.
Me too.
Because it is fun once you get there. But I guess
the
last question on this would be looking at sort of advice that you'd offer to someone else going through similar to what you went through, or perhaps something that you wish you'd known in advance that might have helped you to deal with your situation a bit more effectively.
At the time, I would just want to go to my younger self and take her to a hospital. I should have gone and got proper medical help.
Yes.
I just don't know why I didn't do that. So what I would say is no matter how that person feels, they've got to go and get some proper help. And then in terms of sort of how I feel now and what I've thought about my body over those years, I've obviously never been pregnant since. And it's definitely something I'm telling myself regularly is, we're only here to reproduce. It doesn't matter how good my career is or what house I'm living in, or what, my family members or friends think of me. My body's sole purpose is to be a mum. And so I keep trying to tell myself that this body is not fighting me. She's working really hard to try and get us there. And so I'm now trying to rephrase it as, how can I nourish her? How can I keep her fit and healthy and look after myself and work with this body? Because, that's the most reassuring thing I can think of at times of struggle is we're not fighting each other here. What my brain wants, what my heart wants, and what my body wants is all the same thing. And it's the easiest way to navigate, I think, the day-to-day for me. So I would just advise everyone to just be really gentle with themselves and to reframe it in a way where they don't beat themselves up. Because I think that's what I've been doing is angry with my body when actually I really shouldn't be doing the best.
No, I think that's really valuable and rings true to sort of looking back to the period after mine and Amy's miscarriage. There were a few dark moments there where it felt, I don't want to put words in her mouth, but it sort of felt from Amy's perspective like it was, her against herself. We had a couple of moments for just to remember that no, it's not. It's just, this is what's happening and your body's doing what it needs to do to make itself better, to go again and try again. So yes, what better way to nourish your body and look after your body than run 26 miles around the Shropshire countryside with me?
The two don't align really, because I know we're going to feel well, you won't because you've been doing it every week. I'm going to feel like death's door at the end of this marathon.
I've been told that I need to whinge more because whinging makes people feel more inclined to donate. But I have to say the ongoing issue that I sort of allude to every now and again with my foot and my sort of Achilles problem, by the time I've done 26 miles on that, it is agony. Like, it's really sore. it's a manageable, I sort of know it's coming and I know what to expect and I know that it's going to get better afterwards within a couple of days and I know how to make it feel less painful.
Yeah.
But I try my best to smile for the photos because that's what you're supposed to do. But if there aren't ever many photos of me or videos of me or Instagram stories in the last sort of 6 miles because I don't have the wherewithal to get my phone out and record a video because my foot is absolutely pounding. So
I think we need to get that shot done this week.
Hopefully that's enough sob story to get a few more tenors rolling in. And as ever, if you want to donate, please go to marathonsmiracles.com and click on the big pink donate now button. But yeah, I mean, we did 20 miles before Christmas when I was in the sort of very late stages of my training process, my training schedule. And Faye agreed because it was going to be a December morning, I think, I was setting off at like 6 o'clock. And
it was a long slog
I was going to pick Faye up halfway round and she was going to do the last 10 miles with me to keep me company. And she was like, I think I'll do the first 10 and then see how I get on. And ended up doing all 20 and was absolutely fine and completely put me to shame. Having been training for 5 months specifically for this. Yeah, I'll come.
Yeah.
The next day is always a different matter. But aside from this, you generally do a lot of running. We've bumped into each other at a few races around and about and keep yourself fit and healthy. Have you always done that? Do you think that your fitness journey is part of your internal conversation with yourself about needing to nourish your body, or have you always been a runner?
Okay. At risk of turning this into a full sob story, I will keep it light. I got into running at university just after freshers, effectively. When my dad died, I needed to get out. I needed to just be on my own and think. And that's where I picked up running. And I was terrible. Olly, I was so bad. The first 5K I did, I was sick. And I think it was, oh my God, it took me ages. I'm not joking. It took me absolutely ages. I don't want to give out any times in case I upset anybody, but we're talking probably near double what I would do a 5K in now. And yeah, but my love for running did not start there. I hated it. I had shin splints. I thought it was hell, but it just gave me headspace. And I started fundraising from the get-go for his charity. And that then spiraled. And by sort of year 3 of uni, year 4, into sort of my master's year, it was just what I did. It became something I loved. I had a routine going. And then over the years, I've done some fundraising for Tommy's, but very quietly as to why. Around the landmarks, the half marathon last year, actually, for Tommy's. I don't know why no one's ever said, why are you running for Tommy's? I've never had to tell anybody why. So yeah, I've just done some sort of stuff in the background. But yeah, absolutely love running. Now it's my happy place. It's where I listen to all my podcasts, do all my thinking, and yeah, it's a complete sanctity, I think, for me.
I know the feeling. I'm finding actually now that I'm doing the marathons, I'm doing fewer training runs. I'm supposed to be doing 2 midweek, but we've got a newborn and I've had to go back to work, and it doesn't always happen. And no offense to the wonderful team that we've pulled together and the people that we're running with every weekend. But when I go and run a marathon with someone or with a group of people, I love the running and I'm loving the experience, but I don't get that headspace.
Yeah.
And I find I've never been much of a person to sort of consider my mental health or think about my mental health. And I've very luckily never struggled with it too much. But I think, there have been times in mine and Amy's marriage where I'll have been downstairs for about 5 minutes, having been at work, and she'll just go, nah, put your trainers on, go for a run.
I will never.
I'm not getting that, so I need to try and find those midweek runs again, just to get that space. But I know exactly what you mean. And then it doesn't help you now that Freddie probably likes running more than you do.
Well, do you know, actually, he's really annoying because, so I know that when I met him, he was a runner, and he then ran less over the last few years, I'd say, than I did. Although we've obviously done quite a few marathons together and, half marathons, etc. But then Ollie, he'll just rock up with me at Park Run. He did it on Saturday, having not picked up his trainers for weeks and weeks and weeks, and we'll run a 20-minute 5K or, 43, 44-minute 10K. And I just think it's very humbling. Yeah.
That's not fair.
It's not. It's really not fair.
Well, perhaps a marathon will be the point at which he does actually start to struggle a little bit if he hasn't been training for it specifically. And if he doesn't, he's a freak.
So. I know. He's going to do a bit. He's definitely going to do a bit of Friday's run. He's very excited to do that. And bless him, I got a little bit in my own head about it over the last few weeks, just in terms of our fertility journey and things that had happened. And he said, "Oh, do you know what? Don't worry. If you can't do it, I'll just do it for you." And I thought, God, I'd love to see that.
You smug bastard.
I know.
Well, we'll see how he gets on the day. Where are we going? Tell everyone where we're going to be running, because it's going to be a cool route.
Yeah, he's actually tidying up the route as we speak. That's the task I gave him whilst I talk to you. So I know we spoke a lot about whether we could, run past the hospital where you and Amy had Rupert. And we've also tried to think about whether we could bring in running from Amy's parents and various things. But I think we decided that was quite difficult, didn't we, when we looked?
Yeah.
Very hilly. So I'm thinking Freddie's family are all based in Bridgnorth, and there is a beautiful route from Bridgnorth that connects to Ironbridge. And so I'm thinking we start in Bridgnorth and we'll have a nice crowd there to support us and see us off. Run to Ironbridge, go over the bridge and have a little support system here, and then effectively run the Ironbridge half marathon route. So rejoin the Silkin Way, go along all of the old pathways, and then back into Ironbridge. And somehow I need to make it so that I extend those 4 miles that I'd lost the first time I tracked it, and to try and get us to finish on the bridge again.
Yeah.
But Freddie is checking the route. We're gonna do a little test actually this weekend, just the Bridgnorth to Ironbridge section, to just see how clear it is, given we've had a few storms. It should be fine, but that's my plan.
The last time you went along there, they chopped all the trees down, so they can't have any they can't have had any trees fall on the path.
Yeah, that's true. Although when you go further up, there's properties down there. It's quite eerie, actually. The first time I ever ran down there was on my own in sort of that dusky light. And there's a whole kind of hamlet down there. So, but yeah, I will go and check it out. Yeah.
Interesting. I've sort of done the first bit from the golf club. We've walked the Bridgnorth Golf Club. We've walked along there before. And I've obviously done the Ironbridge bit most of the way up, but I think there's probably a bit in the middle there that we haven't. So yeah, it's going to be good. And we've got some Shrewsbury friends coming to run. I think my mate Tom, who's appeared a few times so far, he's going to do the whole thing with us.
Amazing.
Will, who is our Norfolk marathon man, who people might remember from the Rutland leg. Will is doing 4 marathons this year with us, spaced out across the year, and this is one of them. So he's also going to be joining for the whole thing. Okay. I think my brother might manage. He says 10K. We'll see how he gets on. I'm sure Fred will run with us for a bit, and just various other friends and people around. Yeah, it's going to be a good, fun day out. And then we are going to the best restaurant in Shropshire for lunch, which quite how we've managed to get a table for enough people, I'm not sure, but I'm very excited.
I know. I think we should actually do a shameless plug for Embers and just tell everybody to go to Embers.
Zero shame. Zero shame. To be honest, Faye, I don't think they need our help.
No, they don't.
The amount of exposure that Embers have got these days, I don't think getting a mention on a podcast with an average listenership of about 25 is going to do them
although
any
Adam did a whole topic the other day about reviews on Google. So every little helps. But yes, I'm very excited for that.
we'll take it. I can't wait, Faye, and it's going to be nice to do it on a Friday for a change. It's always, we look for anything new and shiny on this challenge. That running 26 miles becomes slightly repetitive when you get to the 15th one in a row. So a nice Friday morning instead of a weekend is really nice. And obviously, as I said earlier, to be close to home and to be running with good friends is really, really special. So thank you for agreeing to run with us, but I judge really that was probably the easy bit. So thank you more so for opening up, sharing. I know how valuable these conversations are, particularly how valuable this one will be. So thank you particularly for that.
No problem. Not a problem at all. I'm excited. Let's get running.
Yes, absolutely. We'll see you on Friday.
Yes, see you on Friday.
Thanks, Faye.
Bye.
Bye. Bye.